Hello everyone, thank you for watching my video. I hope you're doing well right now while you're watching it. I hope it's also a good video and you get to come out of it learning something. I hope I explain it extremely well. I think it's a really good article and I hope if you haven't read it already that you will. I really did enjoy this read. I felt lucky selecting it for my midterm review. So let me jump right into it and ask you the question that I have for you. And it is how effective are you at being self-critical? Do you have strategies? Do you have techniques? Do you have a mindset you like to get in? Or is there a place you like to go? Um, if you are effective, what gives you that ability to be good at it? And how do you grow from that self-criticism? It's not an easy task, and if you don't have an answer to the question, don't feel like you're unprepared. It's very difficult to be self-critical. Just letting you know, it really helps when you have somebody you trust with you that can, you know, like a supervisor who can carry you along the way. It's very helpful when that happens. So let me just go over the title of the article. It's called A Pilot Investigation of Emotion-Focused Two-Chair Dialogue Intervention for Self-Criticism. And I think it's very important that I break down the context of the entire article, but also the title itself, which seems like a lot, but it does explain what's happening very well, and I'm just going to put more detail into it before we jump in to the main points. Or maybe I'll discuss the main points in this. So there are two chairs. One is the experiencer, one is the criticizer, or the critic. We'll call it the critic. And at any given moment, a client will sit in either chair, depending upon how the therapist chooses to the flow of the discussion. So that's more or less what happens, and in between that, it's more or less if you had two clients at the same time, but the same person occupying those seats. So same person in both seats arguing with themselves, like looking in the mirror. And one is really just the critic side, and one is the experiencer. And they go back and forth, and the whole idea is to really get those emotions out. Very focused on getting those emotions out, so whether it's the experiencer or the critic can hear what it sounds like, how they feel on the inside. So, background of the study, just so you have some more context. It was graduate students who focused on who are part of a emotion-focused therapy training. There was 10 clients in total. They had 5 to 8 therapy sessions. Emotion-focused therapy, what it means is it's a primary adaptive emotions that are important, but they orient the client to become aware of and entitled to adaptive needs and wants. So understanding those emotions and understanding what they're entitled to with needs and wants. I went over how the two chairs operate. The therapist guides, facilitates the conversations on behalf of the client. So sometimes a lot of paraphrasing or rephrasing, it's very critical so that the client understands what they're saying, those emotions. And it also says these emotions, tells the client these emotions to tell either the critic or tell the experiencer this is how they're feeling. So important to clarify and to communicate, because sometimes these meanings have two different things. The jargon can mean something else, and it's important to clarify that. So some of the main points that I think are important, and they identify in the article, they talk about them. They're pretty much stages. I think those are pretty big takeaways. To identify the markers, identify what is bothering the client. It's very important to address that, usually during intake, whether it's a questionnaire or an interview. It's very important to figure out what those are. During that time, maybe during the first session, identifying what's bothering the client, what is their reason for coming in. But as we talked about, maybe something a little more subliminal, what's really feeding into this at least in this case, this intervention style, what is feeding into this critic having such a strong, overwhelming voice compared to the experiencer to more or less oppress the experiencer. And I think that's maybe a main point to come out of this, is that there is a sense of oppression by the criticizer. Maybe another big point is initiating a dialogue. This really helps when you have a therapist who is working hard to listen, reflectively listen, actively listen. So the idea is that you hope to get the client to express self-criticism, accentuate contemptuous tone. So if they're upset, it's like, please explain and don't be afraid to express yourself. The client should explore effective responses, very emotional, and to the criticism and to from that experiencing chair. So more or less, not to lay on very hardly. What I mean by that is to not pile on the experiencer, but the critic should express themselves to a point that they feel like they're expressing themselves to a degree that they feel expressed. And then the experiencer will more or less say, hey, this is what you're doing to me. This is how you're making me feel. So in a lot of ways, this can be confusing because the client is expressing themselves and then reacting to their expression. It's almost like two people talking, but it's just one client. Another important fact, that should stick out, a main point, is the idea of any new emotional experiences or the idea of asserting a need. So it gets to the point where it's necessary to identify goals or needs for change, and they have to be in good reason. The idea is that the experiencer is saying, hey, I'm in this position. I know why you're mad, but I matter. The experiencer side matters, and there's a reason for the experiencer to express that. During this time, it can be difficult for a client, so it's so important that the therapist pays attention to the experiencer side, because it is their chance to be empowered to reach up and to express the need for change that they think is necessary. So it's very important for the therapist to facilitate that process. Another main point is to soften the critic. So the idea is that the critic exists with a lot of sharp edges. The critic side has a lot of sharp edges, very good at punctuating their points. So in an expression of compassion and understanding to the critic, to those hard points, is important. And from the critic to come to terms, help the critic understand that there will be new expectations from the critic. One of compassion, so in ways showing compassion and hoping to get compassion back in return from the critic. Patience from the critic. Dulling the edge, rounding out that whole strength, being more resilient. Another, probably the last main point, would be an integration and negotiation. So both sides have to find a balancing of responsibility and the development of the compassion towards a more true self, where both sides are more balanced, where there's no longer oppression and where they're both on equal level playing fields, one taking the lead sometimes and the other taking the back seat, what have you. So that's the main points. I hope I didn't confuse you on the process. It's a lot like looking yourself in the mirror and having a very difficult conversation and letting one side talk, and then the other side listens, and then the other side talks, and the other side listens, and then this side will listen. Yes, it's almost like, in a sense, having a mental disorder. So, why did I choose this article? I didn't know what was in this article. When I first read it, I thought, okay, this could be very interesting. And I think it did speak to me because, at least what I got out of the article was, I do use this as a coping strategy. How successful I am, I don't know. I think it is much better to speak with others, but when you do have the time to sit down and reflect, that doesn't mean nothing comes out of it. Hopefully something really good does come out of it. When it's with someone else, it's obviously better. They have a different perspective. They can really add a thought pattern that you weren't ready for, and sometimes that really does make a difference. The other maybe is sometimes we are our worst judges, and we have higher standards, and talking it with others can help bring us down, but this also maybe could act as a reminder that we shouldn't be so critical of ourselves. So something that did surprise me was about how the client that they used in the article was very effective at expressing herself. It was actually really awesome read. It was also surprising how the therapist did such a great job of isolating and identifying both different sides at different times, and also getting that conversation moving. I really enjoyed that. But an implication on social work, I do believe that this is kind of an adaptation of the id, ego, superego of Freudian thought, or however you really want to look at maybe the subconscious, unconscious, subliminal, where we do have layers to ourselves, or we do have maybe different sides to who we are, or we're always evolving through the years. But I think what it really does is help every individual understand what's unique about them. And I think there was some great successes. The article said that there was drops in anxiety levels, self-esteem increased. So there are some benefits to this. Could it be applied to anger management and depression? I wonder. I think it works more on interpersonal problems, not intrapersonal. So I don't think it will work with other people, but would work just with one client looking at themselves. From a critical perspective, I don't think the client may understand the intention of the study. It is confusing. I don't think I did the best job explaining it right now, and that's because it is not a normal thing that humans do, where they talk to an empty chair and they imagine themselves sitting there, and it's another state of mind. But I do think the ethical principle of dignity and worth of a person, it could be questioned in that sense, because it could be counterproductive. It could be confusing for them. But I do think there is potential for a lot of growth for an individual, as the success rate did show that. Will the client always receive the therapy? Well, it's questionable. Maybe, maybe not. But I think there is some promise to it, and I think seeking help on these difficult topics of self-criticism is very important, and a great way to do some self-care. So in that case, that is my midterm article review. If you have any questions, you could ask them in the chat. You could ask me in class. I'm not an expert, but I'd be happy to try and answer it for you, and I hope this generates a lot of great discussions. In any case, I hope you have a great weekend, and it's halfway through the semester, so we're almost there. Thank you, everyone.